Archiving started.
Hello, everyone. This is Jim McCormick, and for week 7 in our D132 class, you're going to be continuing on with your work in Microsoft Access. This week, your assignment is really focusing on queries and being able to use criteria in your queries to pull in particular records. So the idea is that you want to take a look at the tables that you want to make a query on, and again, with criteria, you're specifying a certain subset of those records that you want to pull up and display in your query. So a situation could be you've got customers from all around the country that are ordering off our fictional website that we talked about last week. And maybe in a situation like this, you want to figure out, okay, where are my customers, or how many customers do I have in the state of New York that are ordering from me? So you'd put in a criteria on the state field, New York, and then that would go ahead and get rid of all the other records that had customers from other states and just display your New York customers. So then you can go ahead and by doing this, take a critical look at the information, the customers in New York, see maybe what cities are clustered around, et cetera, maybe figure out your advertising, marketing budget that you want to use in New York. So by using criteria, you're able to, with your queries, really start to get inside of your data in your database and help you to make some really good business decisions for yourself or for the company you're working for. And as a result, hopefully, a tool like Access or any other database program that maybe you're using would allow you then to really further what you're trying to do as a business. And so queries, again, really is where Access can really separate itself from Excel in terms of some of the things it can do and some of the ways it can slice and dice the information and data in your database. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up a database we took a look at last week. And this is a little database that we had where we had some orders in a table called my orders table. And right here is my orders table. Now, this is the same table I had last week. One thing I did a little differently with this is I just added a new column on this table, and this was a web order column or field. And in this situation, I just want to check off whether this actually came through the web or not. And so you can see I've got checkboxes in this field in the table. So if I take a look in Design View, which I'll click on my View button upper left, what you see is this web order field. And the data type is a yes/no data type. So when you work with a yes/no data type, you're going to get a checkbox in that field. And so obviously, if you check off that box, it's going to equal a yes for that field in that record. And if you leave it unchecked, then that equals a no. And so it's a real simple way that you can put in a field in your tables and just be able to specify a given situation. So in this case, whether I'm specifying a web order, or something else as a yes/no situation, a yes/no data type using the checkbox can be a real convenient way of handling that in your table. Now, one thing we could take a look at, and we'll build a query off this table then, is let's say I wanted to build a query and I wanted to just pull in the records that actually were a web order and have this checkbox checked off. So right now I've got 2 records showing for this, my 100 order ID record, also my 102 record ID. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a query that would allow me then to pull in these 2 records. And so I'm going to go and click on my Create tab. And we'll go ahead and go in Design View. And I'm just going to use my orders table for my query. So even though it's related to my product table, in this case I'm really just concerned about the order ID and actually was it a web order or not. So I'm just kind of looking at that kind of information. So I'm going to close it off. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double click on order ID, put that field in my query, and also then the web order field. All right, so I've got my 2 fields that I want to use in this query. Now in this situation, then I'm going to put in my criteria. So in our grid area down below, we do have a criteria row. So in this criteria row, for the particular fields you got in your query, this is where you would go ahead and type in a criteria for one of your fields. You can do this in multiple fields. Remember, if you have multiple fields that have criteria, it's basically an ANDing situation. So it'd be the one criteria, your records have to match that criteria and the other criteria you've got in for the query for another field. And if you had a third one, so if you had multiple criteria, you'd have to have records that would match or meet all those criteria to actually have records displayed in your query. So the more you have in there, the least likely it is that maybe you have many or maybe even no records showing up in your query. So you want about that and don't have too many criteria. Usually I would try to limit to one or two at the most so that you're assured of at least seeing some records showing up in your query. So in this case, I want web orders that are a yes. So let's go type in a yes in the criteria box for web order, tab off that field, and that's all I have to do. So I'm going to go ahead and save out this query. And I will call it web orders query. I will hit OK. And now I'll go ahead and hit the view button. And now you can see I've got those two records showing up. So it's the order ID of 100 and 102. So I had two out of those three that were web orders, had the checkbox checked off. And here's my information being displayed. So this is a great example, I think, of how you use criteria. You're just going to go ahead, you put in the fields that you want in your query. So again, I put in my two fields. I'll go back to design view, my order ID, also my web order field. In this case, I'm putting a criteria on my web order field, so I just typed in a yes, and I went from there. Certainly, if I had other fields that I was doing a criteria on, I would then type in a criteria that was based on what I wanted to pull in. So maybe I had a table that was specifying the sex of my customers, so males and females. So if that was the case, and this was, say, instead of web order, the sex of my customer, then I would put down maybe like M for male or F for female, and that's how I had the sexes designated in my table, in my database. And so as you go along, you can really, again, start to really think of a lot of different situations and ways that you can dissect your data in a table and then pull it out in a query. And certainly in a situation like this, I'll go back to my table. I've only got three records in my table right now. So to really analyze this data is not really that hard to do with only three records. But typically in an Access database, you may have hundreds of records in here. And so doing a query and putting in criteria would really become much more beneficial for you as the database manager, or you as the owner, or you as the person on your team who's responsible for manipulating the information, the data for your company. So hopefully this little video gave you a good idea about how you use criteria in your queries. And certainly going forward, there's a lot of different ways you can use criteria, different words that you can put in there, keywords that you use to really give your criteria a lot of flexibility. So make sure you review your book reading this week to get a good handle on that. And certainly if you have any troubles this week with the assignment, which is a travel project assignment, please contact your instructor, and he or she can certainly help you out as you move forward in getting that done. So I hope you have a good week 7 in your class, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Archive recording has been stopped. Archive is